Hey everybody, Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast.
They demand my alter ego, but I won't go.
On today's show, we have local musician Dmeatree Stoianovich. The hardest part of this podcast is now.
Is it my name?
Yeah. So yeah, your name for sure. So I'm trying to think how it was that we got in touch with each other. And I think it's through our mutual friendship with Ryan Metcalf.
Completely random. So you randomly didn't message me. You friend requested me. And I said, I have no idea who this guy is, but his mutuals are really cool. And I kind of, I do peruse the little thing of the mutual friends and kind of see what's on your page. And I don't know, for some reason, most of the time I will decline friend requests.
I made the cut.
And that's not me trying to be like,
no, I love
really
it. I feel better about myself.
I typically will be like, if I don't know this person, I don't want to add them because then I'm just kind of inflating this already big bubble.
Sure.
And it just makes it hard because if I'm not going to interact with somebody, I also wonder like, what do they want to know? But anyway, I looked at your friends list a little bit on your page. I said, this guy seems cool. I'll just add him because of the fact that he's friends with so many mutual creators in the Tampa area,
right? Shakers
and movers. And, I randomly saw you on another friend's page, Mark Rivera.
Yep.
It's a guy
he was just on last week.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a guy I've known for a long time, for over probably 15, 16 years at this point. And I was like, and Mark said he was going to be on a podcast. So I go and check it out and I start to put two and two together. I was like, this is the guy that just added me. And Mark's a really interesting guy. But
great
still,
guy, yeah.
I love listening to people I know or people in the area just talk about their backgrounds, particularly musicians, artists. And I went and listened to the podcast and I was like, this is really cool because it's cool to hear things about Mark that I didn't know.
Sure.
Even though I've known him for so long, particularly what he's been doing lately, just because life has a way of getting in the way of things. And we haven't really talked much in the last couple of years, but I listened and I said, this guy's like a pretty cool host. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here in front of you. And then I started going through the catalog of the podcast on Spotify and I'm like, this is a guy I know. This is a girl I know. This is another person I've heard of in the area. This Tom DeGeorge, and here's like a local politician. And I started to kind of really dive into the catalog of the guests, and I started listening to Ryan Metcalf's. I've listened to Anne's from the Nervous Girls. I don't know her, but now after listening to her podcast, it feels like I know her.
Right. Yeah.
And Ryan also I've known off and on for close to 2 decades, and it's really interesting to hear people's stories. I listen to Jeremy Gloff's too.
Well, his was a great one.
Yeah,
that guy's amazing.
All of them have been great in their own way. And for some reason, I just wanted to message you to tell you, maybe subconsciously I did, maybe there was a part of me that was like, it'd be cool to be on there. But that was
my master plan worked. That was all by design on my part. Yeah. So let me kind of give you a little bit of the background here. Is I'm a family law attorney who wishes he was a rock star, wishes he was an artist, wishes he ran a cool club or bar, wishes he did all the thing that he doesn't, but has gotten to know these people through this podcast. So the funny thing is in trying to market my law firm, I had gotten the idea that if I can friend as many people on social media as possible, I can expand the message. So I did that about a year ago, and I immediately regretted it. There's been a number of things that have happened as a result of that. Number one is there's a number of people who's like, do I know you? Why are you asking? So that was the first thing. And now automatically I'm on the back foot defending myself. It's like, I promise you I'm not some stalker scumbag. I'm just looking to kind of market. So that was number one.
Okay.
And then number two was, I was a prosecutor over in Pinellas County for a number of years, and one of my fellow prosecutors over there asked me out to lunch, and we went out to lunch. And I thought, as an attorney, a lot of times when younger attorneys ask you out to lunch, they want to ask you questions
favors.
No, well, just
how to learn.
What do you think about this? How should I run my business? I'm having trouble marketing, whatever. So, and I'm always happy to do it. There's two types of attorneys that you run into. There's those who don't want to tell you shit because they don't want competition, or there are those who will give you the shirt off their back. And those are the people that helped me. So I wanted to, pay it forward and do that for whatever. At some point in the middle of this conversation, though, he dropped on me that he played with Fugazi, that he, not in Fugazi, but played with Fugazi, was in all these hardcore bands.
Is it Greg?
I can't. Well, I have to be very careful because he's got an alter ego that
Dude,
he doesn't want me to.
I'm going to be honest with you. You've dropped the ball multiple
I know,
times.
but I like to toe the line. So in any event, all of a sudden it went from senior attorney to younger attorney to complete fucking geek.
Okay.
Like, oh my God, you're the coolest person ever. So I had been toying with the idea of a podcast because I drive a lot. I'm putting down children to bed and I have to be. So my life mostly occurs inside of headphones.
Sure.
When I'm not being an attorney, like I don't want to talk to a soul when I get home. And so I'm either listening to music or I'm doing podcasts. And I was like, I can do that. I can't play guitar for shit. I can't do all this other stuff, but I know how to talk to people. I know what I find interesting. I know what I think's cool. And so here we are today.
So first thing I'll tell you is you have a voice for radio. You absolutely
I have a face for radio.
I think that's debatable.
Yeah,
that's always subjective. But your
that.
voice is you have a very good voice. You have a really good rapport when you talk with people. It's one of the first things I noticed. Because like you, I think every 30-something-year-old white male is a podcast guru these days.
Yeah.
But I love podcasts. It's kind of like a companion without all of the challenges that come with a companion. You can't always have a friend with you logistically. You're traveling in a car with yourself, and there's nobody in the car with you. So it's like having a friend, but they don't have to physically be there. So I definitely can relate to that. But yeah, you have a voice and a demeanor, and the way you interview is absolutely, I would have never guessed, you were in your first, year of doing this or your first.
Are you aware of Malcolm Gladwell? And what was it, 10,000 hours?
Sure,
I've probably listened to 10,000 hours of podcasts.
So you're an expert now. Yeah.
Well, if by osmosis or just by experiencing it as a listener, I've picked up things.
No, it's great.
Well, and then also I've cross-examined people. I've deposed many people. So, if I have to shine a light in your face and start, asking you hard-hitting questions, I can do that too.
Would you mind if towards the end, if you have like 5-10 minutes, I can ask you some questions about you? Because
100%.
I'm literally know nothing about you.
We can do that. I've actually been talking with Greg about for the 100th episode, switching chairs and letting him.
I think that'd be great.
He's going to do that. And then also I've heard that he can get me an interview with Michael J. Wolf.
How is he going to swing that?
I don't know. He's got pull, so we'll see. Here's I've mentioned this before, but this seems like a topic that maybe you would be keen on. So lately, on everybody's lips is, have you seen The Social Dilemma? Have you heard of this documentary? It just came out within a couple weeks.
Yeah. So my girlfriend put this on, and this is. I mean, I'll go ahead and ask your question, but I have.
Well, it says there's a line that everybody seems to be posting, which is something to the effect of, "If you can't tell what the product is, you're the product," or something like that. And so basically, social media is trafficking in you, is trafficking in your habits, is trafficking in your interests, is selling exposure to you. It came out with maybe less than sinister designs, but has been bastardized into sinister means to ends. And so kind of I think the dilemma, although I haven't watched it all the way through, is weighing the good with the bad. So having not seen it all the way through the end, here's my kind of perverse take on podcast, which is I'm using social media and technology to bring me closer together with people by talking with them for longer than most people talk to their significant other or their children.
So, but what's wrong with that?
Nothing. I'm saying
Right.
I'm saying I'm going to use it for something good. And I'm going to, everybody's saying social media is pushing us further apart and is divisive and is allowing us not to interact with the outside world. But by what other circumstance would you and I be having an hour-long conversation today?
So that's what I was going to say. So there's a lot of evils, and I'll try to keep this short, a lot of evils with social media. And I have a problem of existing in the moment. That's the way my brain works, is typically I'll either over romanticize the past and have anxiety about the future, despite the fact that a lot of times
being present is difficult.
It's difficult for me. So it's a way for me, and I think my brain uses it as a way to kind of dissociate from that moment, or also to decompress. So as I'm scrolling through all this thing, the way my brain works is I can intake. So my girlfriend, when we're like, for instance, trying to pick a movie on Netflix, I can literally scroll through 20 movies in about 5,
I think you and I
seconds.
are probably very similar.
Right. And she's like, how are you reading that? I'm like, well, I am. And that's just the way my brain functions. So I don't get exhausted when I'm going through a social media feed. It doesn't rip through my brain. It kind of almost like calms
That's the
it down.
frequency you operate on.
Right. So,
and in many ways, so I've had this conversation with Andrew Domestico. I don't know if you know him.
I don't know. No.
He does the whole Blade of Sir stuff, and he's got Achilles, another band. Really great guy.
Blade of Sir sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a
Now you
local.
mention it.
Here's some of his discs
I will
right
check
here
it
in
out.
front of you.
Cool.
But we always have this running conversation about how people who listen to hard music are some of the calmest, coolest people that you're ever going to run into.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think that's very true.
You know, there's a frequency that we operate on that speaks to, and it's the same with social media, and it's the same with scrolling things. My wife will want to, you know, okay, let's talk about this one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this one. I'm like, decision,
Yep.
100%
like that.
And I won't ask you about what you do. I know that's kind of a separate world, but I would bet that what you do requires you to have that gear.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, it's a lot of what I do is it's basically a kind of like a HR administrative type work, but I'm constantly interacting with people and
putting out fires and triage. You're in triage.
And that's what's funny. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
My girlfriend's a nurse, so she's doing it on a much more critical level to where it's life and death.
But she's got to have a bedside manner where maybe she's dealing one-on-one with people.
And she's amazing at
Right.
it. But we differ so much in terms of she doesn't tend to really want to disassociate, and she calms down and decompresses in a different way than I do. But what you were saying is sometimes she'll go to show me something on the internet. 99.9% of the time, my response is, I'm sorry, I've already seen that.
Yeah.
So she gets really mad at me. She's like, how much time do you spend on the computer or on your phone? And technically it's a lot, but I'm still, the way I view it is like, is it healthy to dissociate all the time? Maybe not, but it's like I'm a functioning alcoholic when it comes to social media. You know what I mean?
Well, 100%. And so this will seem like a humble brag, and I don't mean it as such, but I think I'm an extremely empathetic person.
Yeah.
And so I actually was researching this over the weekend because I was having an argument with people on social media. One of the
That's
downsides,
a mistake. Yeah.
right, about people with lower emotional intelligence and how that manifests itself in their political beliefs. You could see how that would just spiral into a rabbit hole from there. But sympathetic is the ability to feel bad for somebody's situation. Empathy is that coupled with the ability to experience what they're experiencing simultaneously. So I am a only child.
Me too.
My parents were substantially older than all my friends' parents were.
I didn't have that. But
They had some marital issues, and they both relied on alcohol. And so as an only child, I was very keenly aware of what my parents were going through.
Oh, yeah.
And so that opened me up or made me sharpen my sword unwillingly to being very keenly aware of everybody's.
I'm the same way.
And it becomes exhausting.
It is.
Because, and I've often used the analogy, it's like having 20 TV sets on at one time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I need to silence all that.
Yep.
And so a way for me to silence all that is to put my headphones on and listen to music, or to go off into a room by myself and play guitar. Or for me to watch a movie, or for me to scroll through. It's like kind of this like cone, like they put on the dog's head so they don't scratch their ass. It's my little, personality cone. Leave me alone for an hour or two.
So we are just meeting right now, and you are more accurately describing, I guess, my day to day than I think most people could ever understand. So like that social media thing is not a true point of contention, but sometimes, like when I'll be doing it, in another setting. Sometimes I think like yesterday we went bowling to this place called like the Main Event, which is like a Dave and Buster's.
That's true.
And it is just like a assault on the senses.
Oh,
it's coming at you from
video
every
games,
direction.
lights, music,
right. And
people throwing strikes.
And we're there. I don't understand. We were going to talk about music, but now it's going to turn into a therapy session.
That's all right.
So we're there, and all I can think about is we're running a little late. It's my girlfriend's mom's birthday.
Holy shit.
We're running late. I'm freaking out because I know we're holding up the lane. Why do I give a shit? We're holding up the lane for like a multi-corporate.
We're going to talk now once a day because I talk about this a lot of show. I have a therapist I go to once a week, and so much of our conversation is about what impacts me or influence me does and why it shouldn't, or why I shouldn't care as much. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with being on time or inconveniencing other people.
Yep.
Like too much, like kind of like it's okay. They can be inconvenienced, but It's this, I bet you $1 million it has to do with you being an only child.
I think you're right.
I will get you. So
give me some books.
Let me, I will tell you. So this sounds cheesy. The title sucks, but it's actually a good book and it's a good, thing for you to, your girlfriend or your wife?
Girlfriend.
Your girlfriend will thank me. There's a book called The 5 Languages of Love, which
I think she's already tried to get me to read.
100%. So there's 5 ways that you can communicate or receive love.
Yeah.
And the problem is that not all couples communicate it or receive it in the same way.
Yeah.
So my way of showing love to my significant other is by acts of service.
Oh, Jesus
I will
Christ.
bust my ass at work. I'll make sure that everything is paid for. I will take the kids to school in the morning. I'll pick them up at night. I'll get them to bed. I'll do the bath and all this other stuff. She wants me to be present with her. There's this sitting home.
Know it's the same
right,
thing.
Right. So she wants me to be present with her. She wants me to experience life with her and to reflect on shared experiences and all this stuff. And it's not that I don't want to. I'm just not wired to naturally be that way. So I have to try to say, why don't we, well, Saturday, let's go look for the chairs for this room that you've been talking about and all this other stuff. But my natural wiring is I just worked my ass off all day to make sure everything was cool.
Right.
So can I have an hour or two to listen to Napalm Death or something?
You know what's funny is again, like I said, we've never met, and I feel like I'm talking to a taller, better bearded and more haired version, but better haired version of myself. It's crazy, and I think your observations, like you said, you've said a few things to me already that I know you understand, because even though the circumstances might not match 100%, you understand where my mind is. And I think in a sense, it's like a smidge more comforting than, because I don't know how you feel like when you deal with what your wife is asking for, because what your wife is asking for and what my girlfriend is asking for are completely reasonable. And
100%.
Right. And they're not. And when I laughed, when you said earlier, it wasn't because I think it's ridiculous. I laughed because it's so similar. And part of me, it's so hard to kind of change that, because you and I have what feels natural to us. And that same feeling of natural is in them, but just in a different way.
Right.
So how do you bring those two worlds together?
You work.
Exactly.
And it requires a high emotional intelligence, level of empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
And I, being a divorce attorney, I think it makes me a better spouse, because I've seen how these marriages go wrong. And a big part of it is not willing to put the other person before yourself. You got to put the other person before yourself. Be able to communicate your emotions in a way that doesn't start, drama. Like everybody thinks you have to fight about something. Yeah. And you don't. But one of the big parts is knowing the time to talk about it. And one of my big things that I always talk about is being able to sit in the pocket of discomfort and not act in the pocket of discomfort. So you've just had an argument. Don't immediately try and fix it. Don't immediately try and talk to them about it. That's not the time. Or, they just did something you're not happy with. Don't talk about it then. Right. Wait till things are cooler and just say, babe, I love you to death, but maybe if we talked about whatever the case may, me doing the dishes or whatever in this circumstance, as opposed to this circumstance, that sort of thing. I wanted to
go wherever. Okay. I'll go.
Well, so we were talking before the show, and you were talking about you live close to the studio. And saying, "Great, you can text me whenever someone's trying to break in." And I said that jokingly, because it's not that I want to tempt fate, but this place is like fucking Fort Knox, because it's all cinder block and block glass windows. Building. You have to drive like a semi through this to open it up.
Which could happen on Tampa Road.
100%. And not only that, someone will forget to lock the back door tonight, and we'll get taken for everything we have. But I, at some point in my late 20s, became deathly afraid of flying.
Okay.
And it was a huge thing, like massive anxiety flying. And as I didn't fly a bunch as a kid, because my parents were both school teachers and we didn't have any money to fly. But I'd flown a couple times and it didn't bother me. But as I graduated from law school and started to work more, I started to become more and more afraid of flying. And can
I ask you, sorry to interrupt, did anything trigger it? Like, did anything?
Well, I'm going to tell you.
Okay. Sorry.
So no, you're good. I had graduated law school. I had finished at the state attorney's office, and I was opened up my own law practice, and I shared space with some other attorneys, and we had an IT guy, and ironically, the IT guy, he did that in his part-time when he wasn't a pilot flying Southwest. I think it was Southwest. It was Delta, back and forth from New York to London.
Okay.
And I said, this is becoming a thing. And he's like, well, because the more power you have in your life, the more noticeable it is that you're losing control when you're in an airplane, because you're completely at the disposal. You're powerless. Yeah. And he's like, so we actually see this a lot with CEOs and people because they don't like being where they're not in control of a situation. And so that's what it was. So you were mentioning, the more I have to lose, the more fearful I become of losing it. And in a lot of ways, I saw a parody with that. And, the more control I am of things, the more control. So, but in your situation, as I have got kids now, as I've got a wife, like I could be behind on the rent as a single guy. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I just go find another place. Now it's like my kids will be put out on the street. My wife will be put on the street, or I have these things I don't want to lose. Right. So 100%, the less you have to lose, the less worried you are about things. And I don't know, another documentary. Did you ever see the minimalism documentary on Netflix? Okay.
No, I've not seen that one.
A big return to less is more, the less belongings, the less financial responsibilities and all these things.
I feel like that's really relevant in I guess the times I've always felt like things don't, not nihilistic, but at the times I've always felt like whatever happens has always been, I think, when I've had, either been single or just kind of been down in the dumps in certain times of my life. And I think when you fall in love, or when you have kids, like I don't have kids, but in your circumstance, when you have kids, you have a family. And despite the fact that I'm not married or have kids, I do consider like my current circumstance, like it's my family.
Right.
And
well, if you love someone,
right. I love
loving someone.
I love the person I'm with. I love our situation. Our dynamic sounds, we're different people, but I think that's part of what makes it work. But anytime I've been in a circumstance where things are good and happy, I always am a little bit more like, okay, well, when are things going to go wrong? So it's kind of like,
dude, oh man.
Right. Exactly. You and I sound like we have a lot in common, but
you can't enjoy the good stuff because you're waiting for the bad stuff.
Yeah, because it's going to happen.
You do better when things are bad because usually, it's like, of course.
It's easy.
Yeah.
I know that.
This is what I was, this is where I can exist on this plane.
Yeah.
Because you don't think you deserve good things.
I guess maybe that's probably part of it. Yeah. I have listened to a lot of, you mentioned it on pretty much most of the episodes I listened to about the therapy thing, and all joking aside, I was listening. I'm like, there's always a stigma, as a male, and particularly like I'm originally from Eastern Europe, so everyone's like emotionally stunted.
Yeah,
because you have to be partially.
Yeah.
And that's just the kind of family I grew up in, and there's always this little bit of stigma of like, well, you pick yourself up and you dust yourself off, which is a good thing that I'm glad I learned, because I can thrive in scenarios and circumstances that maybe would have broken me or would have been really hard to get through if I hadn't have gone through that. But it's also made it hard to be honest about. I know who you got that from, by the way, that poster back there. I know exactly.
This one?
Yes. No, the battle.
This one.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. I just put two and two together. Yeah. I know where that came from. I'll talk to you about it later. But getting to that point where you realize like, hey, you can be a 30-something or 40-something-year-old guy and have your shit quote unquote together and still realize like, I have my life, superficially on the surface together, and my personal life is pretty good. But there's this little piece of the pie chart that's kind of been a disaster and has been hampering you your whole damn life. Like, it's okay to maybe say, maybe I should go talk to somebody, or maybe I should get some kind of help, or just a sounding board that's not related to me. That's not a family member. That's not a friend that can just tell me objectively what their observations are, because they don't really have to worry about hurting my feelings or what I'm going to be like when I get home.
100%. I mean, that's the thing. And I've had this conversation with my wife. She's like, oh, I want you to feel like you can come to me about whatever. And it's like, I do, but I don't want to unload on you every day.
That's tough too. You don't want to be a toxic handler.
Yeah, because you're my partner who I love, and I want to enjoy my relationship. I don't want to just bum you out constantly. Yeah. But so my father, despite things that he dealt with in his life, was my hero and was a beautiful man, very very intellectual. Was not a toxic masculine type of guy. Very academic, very intellectual, very philosophical. And he always used to say, it's probably not either or, it's both and.
Sure.
And, in law school and studying, one of the things that they spend a lot of time with you on is logical fallacies. And you see this often on Facebook, and when people are arguing, is it can only be this or that.
Right.
So in the context of what you're talking about, I think you can be a tough, pull yourself up by the
Absolutely.
bootstraps person and also go to therapy.
You'll be better. You'll be better.
I think you're like a superhero at that point. So, I mean, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think
True.
you can do both those. And so, yeah, apart aside from having someone who you don't worry about their judgment of you, is the great thing about therapy. And in a lot of ways, the great thing about these podcasts is you reveal these nuggets that oftentimes come from you that you didn't even know were there.
Yeah.
And you hear yourself speak truth that had to come from bouncing it off of somebody else. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the great thing about therapy. That's the great thing about this podcast. That's the great thing about talking to someone for longer than 5 minutes. You know, what did you do today?
Right. Exactly.
What do you want for dinner? What do you want to watch on Netflix? And that's the sum total of your conversation with somebody.
Yep.
You know, I think the conversation is a lost art. And so for this very reason, I think it's so important. Can we get into history of you
Whatever
a little bit?
you want to do, man.
All right. Were you born overseas?
Yeah, I was born overseas. I was born in Eastern Europe. So I'm a Eastern Bloc, ex-Soviet Bloc country, Bulgaria.
Okay.
Lived there for a couple of years, and then my family uprooted right as communism was falling, like in the early 90s.
How old were you?
I was pretty young. Somewhere between 5 and 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you remember it at all?
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say is you were talking about flying. I fly pretty often still. And there's been moments where I'm flying and I'm literally like, holy shit, this is insane. Like when you're transatlantic.
when you start to
when I start to think about
it.
Right. When I'm actually thinking about it as opposed to just like shoveling it down under the ground. And you think about like, I'm flying over the Atlantic Ocean. If we crash, we're dead. If we don't die, we're going to die in the Atlantic.
I have this weird thing about I'm more scared of flying over water than I am over land.
It's way worse.
Because I don't want to like submerge in water,
and
but
get eaten by something or drown.
By no stretch is crashing into a mountain any better.
It's not. It's all
probably
horrible.
worse.
But yeah, so I've flown a lot, and that definitely resonated with me a bit. But for some reason, I don't drink when I'm on a flight. I don't take any kind of medications. I've just gotten to this point where my brain kind of just fizzles out and I just don't think about what's happening.
I read a great book that explains to you literally every sound you hear on a plane.
Is it terrifying or no?
It helps me a lot.
Really?
It's like, that is the sound of the landing gear. That is the sound of the cabin pressurizing. Yeah. The amount of turbulence it would require to do and what you think is bad turbulence it's
insane.
Light years apart.
Yeah.
Like there's so much, everything that I'm afraid of, you really have no reason to be afraid of.
It's pretty low chances.
Yeah,
it really is.
But no, that book helped me out a lot. Now I'm pretty cool. And the other thing that's helped me is now with kids on is I've got to worry about them.
Yeah, you don't care
because their
about the
ears,
flight.
they don't know how to clear their ears out. So you got to, I remember the first time we took my daughter on a plane. This is my wife. This is why she's amazing. She made like 20 goodie bags.
Handed them out.
With Reese's peanut butter cups and little notes saying, sorry, this is our daughter's first plane trip. And now we had 20 people helping us with our daughter.
Awesome.
Like everybody was turning around and it was the best experience ever.
You can see the best and the worst of people on planes. I've seen that, like an example of that. And then I saw a man one time after like a 6-7 hour flight from New York to some part of Europe, because you always have to connect to get to Bulgaria. There's no direct flights. So you always connect to like Germany, UK, or sometimes Italy, but most of the time Frankfurt. Anyway, we get off this like 6-7 hour flight, and this kid was just crying as we're disembarking.
Right.
And the guy's like, "Get your kid to be quiet." And the lady's like, "He's been quiet for." It's just horrible. You just see the worst.
Having a kid is the best remedy if you have problems with kids crying, because if you go from being annoyed as shit by him to feeling sorry for the parent.
True. I already have that. I don't,
well, some people are gracious already, but I was never like, shut that kid up. But I'd just be like,
yeah, you do that.
But now it's just like, hey, you need me to help you carry those bags out, or you want me to watch them while you run the other one to the bathroom or whatever. So no, 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, back to Bulgaria, unless you had something else you want.
No, for sure. So only child, you said.
Right. Only child. We moved to the U.S., Pasco County, Florida, of all places. Obtained.
So you went to the only more dangerous place than Bulgaria.
It's the worst. Pasco is like,
It's not Polk County, but it's
close,
right.
Man.
It's the younger brother.
Hudson and those areas. Again, I'm not making a all-inclusive statement. It's just there's some things about Pasco and like Port Richey and Hudson that's just not great. I mean, there's been meth problems there and
motorcycle gangs,
crime, just not great stuff there.
Right.
I was fortunate enough. I'm not even going to act like I was affected by it. I wasn't, but still, it is an area, especially back then where you grow up, there's like not much to do. I mean, there's not a lot of like artistic things happening.
Elementary school and high school there?
Elementary school through high school, and ended up going to USF for my undergrad. I did move away, but not for college.
Okay.
So I moved away after college.
Where did the music bug bite you?
The music bug bit me pretty young. I had some of the American friends I made, some of the first friends I made. I was in school with them all the way from elementary to middle. They started playing in a band. Of course, I was the one guy who couldn't play any instrument at that point. So I always just really wanted to hang out with them. They were my really cool friends. They were kind of like the gatekeepers of music for me at that point in time.
Who were your early bands? Who is it?
So European wise, you do like things like the Scorpions, Michael Jackson, because you're European, Madonna, like my aunt. I only have like a 10-year difference with my aunt, and she would introduce me to a lot of music back in Europe.
Right.
Europe still is like, they listen to the weirdest shit in the world there. Like
right.
Techno pop is still super popular there. But that was in Europe. Once I moved here, my friends started to kind of introduce me to pop punk bands like Fat Records, if you're familiar.
For sure.
A lot of NoFX like Lagwagon, Strung Out, Millencolin. Then I started, after that portion of my life, like when we got into middle school, I started listening to nu metal, which is another embarrassing phase. And then ultimately started.
Except for Deftones.
Deftones are great. They're one of
right.
the best bands, I think, of the last like 20, 30 years.
Fuck you, Greg. Right.
Greg doesn't like them?
Oh, we're actually planning a podcast called Tone Deaf, where I spend as much time as I need to get him to like Deftones.
One of the most, see, but the thing is, like, if you don't like them, you don't like them.
He doesn't like a bass with more than 4 strings on it. He doesn't like a guitar with more than 6 strings on it. And God forbid you have a turntable in your band.
So the guy in Deftones, Frank Delgado, has not scratched on a record since probably White Pony. So that's my first offense. Nobody in Deftones has ever played more than 4 strings. Steph Carpenter, I will say, has gone up to 9 strings, but typically only uses about 4 or 5 per song. So it's kind of like by default, it's less.
But that's because it's like super drop tuning, isn't it?
And he just smokes a lot of weed.
Yeah.
And he likes Meshuggah a lot. So he wants to sound like really heavy. And then, I mean, there's never been a band, I think, that's been able to intertwine elements of like My Bloody Valentine.
Shoegaze metal, which, by the way, moving forward, that is what I got, not specifically, but there's a shoegaze aspect to High Beams.
Yeah, for sure.
You agree?
High Beams.
So High Beams, is that how many bands are you presently in?
Presently, I'm in 4. So High Beam is, I'll start. Okay. So do you want me to go back to like how I started playing, or do you want?
I do. I'm sorry. I just got excited.
We can tell me what you want to do now. Do you want to go backwards?
Let's go from you getting into music to your bands.
I'll try to make it really simple because the details are what matter. So my friends got in a band. I couldn't play anything, so I got to watch them excitedly perform in a pop punk band. I still love those guys. I'm friends with all of them, but I didn't start playing until I was about 15. I started playing on my friend's drum set. He was a drummer. Wasn't really good at it, wanted to be a frontman, so I started playing in just like a horrible theatrical nu metal band that was just, we wore masks. Slipknot was cool. It was embarrassing.
Okay.
I think we played one show. Then I got into a band with those guys. I actually sent you a file. Ultimately, it was a horrible band name called Silence After Tragedy.
Yeah, but you had fucking Cobra on it.
We had Cobra. We had Stallone from there. We did a lot of cool stuff. All things aside, we got to.
I like that. I like that song a lot.
I appreciate it.
I mean, all your stuff was killer. Like,
thank you.
I'm not all. I love music, and I'd never want to shit talk music like
but
what
it's
people
subjective.
are into. Well, for sure, but there's a spectrum of my appreciation for music, and everything you sent me was great.
And it's all over the place.
And it's all over the place. And it was unexpected because a lot of the stuff that I get kind of always falls within a harder range. But as we kind of move forward, it gets a little bit more.
That's kind of like the trajectory I think like my life kind of took in terms of what I was listening to music. When you're young, you listen to aggressive stuff. But anyway, that's kind of what I cut my teeth on, for lack of better words, is I literally started playing because my friend's like, I need a drummer. I have a drum set. I don't want to play drums. I started playing drums. Never, ever learned how to do anything right.
Never played in band. Never did drums.
No.
Marching band or anything.
And back then you feel like that's like a badge of honor. Like, oh, I never did anything technically right. And I now at like in my mid 30s, I wish I would have gone
Had all your rudiments.
Yeah. And
whatever.
learned things right. Cause I'm literally doing them now in my mid 30s.
Right.
And I feel like a baby learning to crawl. Even though I can play music, I don't know how to do all these things technically.
Well, but that's,
right.
I mean, that's the way, James Hetfield recorded 5 albums before he figured out how to sing without destroying his throat. Most guitarists, I know, Dave Grohl's like, I can't read music. I can't write music.
But he's like a virtuoso.
Well, but most people kind of go into it backwards is my point.
That's what I'm doing now.
Like as a kid, you go by your ear and go by your heart and your gut and your balls and all this other stuff. And then you get to a certain point. It's like, it would be really nice to know what other notes could come next after this.
Yeah, when you get older, now instead of like getting really mad and going, why can't I figure stuff out? I'm realizing like, oh, it's because you never learned how to do it.
Because your vocabulary.
Yeah, you didn't learn
need to improve
A, B, or
your
C.
vocabulary.
Right. So
100%.
But that's that. So I started playing with that. That fizzled out really quick. But 3 of those guys, and we added a bassist. 3 of those guys started like, we got really into metalcore. There was a bunch of these Christian metalcore bands. None of us were Christian. I don't care what anybody's.
You can't understand what anybody's saying anyway.
So, right. I mean, so we started listening to these bands. Like, I don't know if you ever heard a band called Zayo. Early Under Oath when they were almost like a black metal band. All these bands that like Living Sacrifice, and we really got into that type of music. And that was in the early 2000s. And the band fizzled out, I think in like 04, 05 when most of us went to college, but we got to do some cool stuff in terms of as just a bunch of little kids from Pasco. We went on to like, we did a couple tours, like 2 Texas, 1 to North Carolina. And we got to play locally with a lot of really bands that became huge in the metalcore scene.
I'm listening to you. I'm just texting.
No, absolutely.
Elliot Mayo, who's next. So.
Well, I thought Elliot was coming. Was coming on before me. So anyway, one of the bands we used to play with was one of Elliot's old bands, Beauty and Chaos. So I've known Elliot for close to 20 years too.
That's awesome.
He's been like a scene staple. That guy is, if you want to take people that are about that life, like he is about that life. He loves music. He is 100% authentic in what he does. He's like super sincere guy. And he's like a book of knowledge on heavy music. But anyway, we would play like the State Theater. We played, I don't know if you remember Venom when it was around.
Yes.
Played Venom, like opened for Bury Your Dead. We've opened for Hatebreed.
Wow.
Yeah. Just
as
like,
which band?
Silence After Tragedy.
Okay. Wow.
But we were just like, I think what happens, and this is probably still the case, is when you're a dependable group of guys that can show up, like you're not going to get plastered. You're going to be on time. You're going to get off stage on time, and you're going to do the 25 minutes you're given and not a minute over. People just come to know, even if the music's not great, because our music wasn't great. Like it's fine. I have no problem saying that now. We were young, but like we were dependable and we could get people to come out and we did what we were supposed to do. So we got to play on a lot of these really cool bills with bands I still listen to today.
Right.
So it was really worth it in that regard. But I think once we all got into our early 20s, everyone's like, hey, we're losing money doing this.
Right.
Like it is not going to work out the way we thought. Nobody wants to go tour nationally. It's too expensive. Let's just like go live our lives. Everybody went off to college or was finishing college, got jobs. I didn't play drums for like years after that.
Oh, wow.
Like 7 years I went by without playing drums after that band.
So how old were you when you got back into it?
Probably late 20s, almost 30. Yeah.
So you stopped when you were what? Like 19?
Yeah, no. I stopped when I was about like 23, 24.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I did a few stints here and then. I played drums in Jerry X for a while, which I feel like every drummer in the area has played in her band.
Yeah.
I played in her band for a little bit. Then I did that studio project I sent you, which wasn't really active. But other than that, from like 2004 or 5 till about 2013, I didn't play drums.
What got you back into it?
I missed it. I didn't realize like how bad I missed it. I think it's one of those things you don't know how bad it is until you start to kind of you start going to more local shows and you're seeing how much fun people are having. And it's a different mentality too. Like when I got older, I stopped caring about it being a competition. There's not this chip on our shoulder of like, who's the best drummer? Who's not? Who's better than me? Who's worse than me? And that's I think like a kind of an ego thing you try to shed in general as you get older. And I was very like insecure because I felt, not great about my skills and all these things. And I would see these drummers that were amazing. And then sometimes I make myself feel better because I'd be like, oh, that drummer's not great. But then I got almost 30 and I started realizing like, it's about expression. It's about like seeing what people can do and how they can get what's inside them out.
Communicate. Yeah. I have this conversation a lot, and it's not a great novel concept, but the most technical music is generally boring to me and antiseptic. And there's some music that's technical that's just amazing, but I would much rather someone whose guitar's a little bit out of tune, or maybe, is beating the shit out of their drums and they're about to fall over, whether it's the Ramones or the Bad Brains or wherever you want to go with it. I mean, the
passion is
the
there.
passion, the fire in the belly, and they're getting it out. It doesn't have to be technically.
Exactly.
That's, and even in recordings, it's the little glitches or they missed a beat, or the lyrics started too late, or whatever the thing was. That's where the juice is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when do we get into the Fast Talkers? When do we get into
So Fast Talkers was the first thing. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Fast Talkers was the first thing that it was an existing band that drummers moved away.
Okay.
So he was the singer in that band and the songwriter, and he's, I'd say, the creative mind behind the whole thing. He was friends with a few of my friends, and they knew I was like, hey, I really want to get back into drumming. I literally just rented a rehearsal space at People's Storage to just play my drums.
Right.
Because my friend had a space there. He's like, you can split it, blah, blah, blah. That place is insane, by the way.
That's awesome.
There's got to be so much illegal stuff going on.
Oh,
there,
yeah.
allegedly.
That's
I don't
funny,
know.
allegedly.
But it's a great place because it allows for people to practice. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got a space there. He knew I was kind of looking for something. He said, hey, this pal of mine, they're losing their drummer. Do you want to maybe try playing with them? And it'd been years since I'd been in a band. I was like, you know what? I don't know if this material necessarily resonates with me, but I'll go jam with the guys, see what happens. Started jamming. Lo and behold, it's like 2.5, 3 years later now, I've been playing with them. High Beam came after because a few of those guys that I mentioned I'd shared a space with were looking to do something different. So it's, I guess you can call it a super group, but that implies that we think highly of each other, which we don't. But it is people from like a lot of other bands.
You just curated yourself from other bands.
In a chance. I got lucky because they're guys from a lot of other great bands. Like Mike Ramondi used to play bass in Empire Cinema, and he used to be in a band from back in the day called Macrame Owls. Ariel Cortez has played in Zulu Wave and Dawns, both really great bands. Jared is our singer and like a rhythm guitarist. He plays in Hello Joyce, if you ever heard of them, in a band called the Blonde Tongues, really great like revival rock and roll. And then the other guy, Ed, who plays bass, he's also in Fast Talkers with me, but he's a great bassist. So it's kind of like these guys who all just wanted to do something different than their acts or their bands that they had left. And they said, do you want to play drums? I was like, yeah, absolutely. You guys are all phenomenal musicians.
It's amazing to me, and it's been revealed through my, doing this show, what a deep catalog and what a deep roster of amazing bands and musicians.
Tampa's amazing.
It's insane. And so before I got so much into local music, I mean, I could speak at length about the history of death metal in Tampa, and then obviously, hip hop and Latino music and that sort of stuff. But it's been amazing the number of bands. And I mean, I have to thank people like Elliot for that, because he's
an encyclopedia.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I'm usually the guy in most of my relationships that's introducing people to music. Elliot's like every day and I'm like a kid in a candy store because
and it's good.
He 100%. Stuff. But haven't you've gotten to points in your life where it's like, I'm just bored with everything I'm listening to.
Oh, absolutely.
I need something new. And you're kind of like, oh, but literally with him now, it's just like every day it's like, Witchbender or, all these different people. And it's just like, I had no idea about it. So it's been so bad. But I can't emphasize enough what you sent me today. I was literally blown away by all of it.
Did you actually like it?
100%.
It wouldn't hurt my feelings if you did.
Oh, I would tell you. Well,
awesome.
I wouldn't tell you. I would compliment you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't talk about it.
You're like me.
No, yeah. But no, I loved it. And I still I have this thing that I do, and I don't know if it's complimentary or not, but I have to tell people who their band sounds like.
Sure,
and
I love it.
And I suspect on occasions that maybe it's like, oh, we're trying to do our own thing. And
I don't care.
But no, I definitely, there was almost like a sped up Cure aspect to the High 100%. Beams. And Disintegration is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Cure are so much better than the Smiths, and I don't care what anybody says.
I saw Morris.
You're going to lose half the fan base.
Yeah, I've taken a good beating from friends for being
Cure,
a Morrissey fan. But no, Cure for sure. They got a new album coming out, so pretty stoked about that. So there was a couple other things though that you sent me. What was the last one that you sent me?
So the last thing I sent you might have been the studio project, which I told you I did kind of in between. That was just like a metal thing, but it was cool because I got to record at Mana Studios, which is Eric Rutan's studio.
Yeah.
We were in the B room, but that's where like so much great death metal that's still coming out.
Right.
It's coming out of Mana. They produce like major label bands. So I got to do that. That was a little stressful. But that I mentioned we literally rehearsed 5-6 times, recorded an EP. It's called The Fevered Circle. With one of the guys Mark Rivera knows. He was in a band with Mark Rivera, Barry Pinto.
Right.
Great guitarist. He just asked me, he's like, hey, can you just play drums on this? We'll probably never be a band. And I said, yeah,
fucking good drummer. You're like a relief pitcher or like
I would say relief pitcher is accurate because I'm not great at anything other than just maybe filling in enough and keeping us from losing the game.
If you can keep time for everybody. And, you know, I talk about it a lot, like especially recording, like it's all on your shoulders.
So it's so hard.
All on your shoulders.
I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be there 4 hours before everybody else, micing up your set.
Set your stuff up.
How many pieces do you
I play small. I've always played like a small kit. And when I was younger, I'd play a 5, which was 2 rack toms and a floor with the kick drum and the snare, obviously. But over time, even when I was younger in my 20s, I was just like, all I need is a rack tom and a floor tom. So I just play a trap set.
It's true. You watch some good drummers and they can make, you know,
right,
a 5-piece sound like a 30-piece
100%.
or whatever. I mean, one of my favorite, when we were talking about you coming on the show, I kind of listed off some of my favorite drummers. One of my all-time favorites is Dale Crover from the Melvins. And he can just crush.
He's an animal.
And then they had a brief period there where they had Big Business as a rhythm section, and Cody Willis from Big Business. And what was cool about that was Dale Crover and Cody one's left-handed and one's right-handed. So they were...
Did they play together?
Yeah, they were playing together, and they were like the mirror opposite of each other. The song Night Goat by the Melvins at the beginning of it, when the drums start hitting, it's just... And I saw Big Business open for Sleep at the Ritz, and I was so stoked about seeing Matt Pike because I'm a High on Fire Sleep fan, but I'd now seen both. But I was my big excitement that night was to watch Matt Pike, and I gotta say, Cody Willis.
You didn't care.
I was like texting people. I was like, watch this fucking guy play drums, and like my sternum was like shaking, and so amazing. Where was I going to go? So Dale Crover. But I wanted to ask you some of your drum heroes. Okay. I mean, and we'll leave John Bonham and Neil Peart out of it because that's kind of hacking everybody.
I actually to say, and this is no disrespect to Neil Peart, I don't really have like a...
You're not a proggy drummer guy.
Well, I would say I like prog, but I just never really got into Rush. Yeah. And I know that that's
like
blasphemy. I like components of Tool, but
you
Tool
like him as a drummer?
Danny Carey is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think
Tool talk about a lot of fucking pieces to your drum set.
But I also think Tool writes the same song over and over in a different way, which is whatever. And somebody's going to get upset, I'm sure.
That's
but
right.
Danny Carey's phenomenal. I think Maynard's, I actually like Perfect Circle better than I like Tool. Just because they're more straightforward.
Well,
but I love, so you mentioned Deftones, Abe Cunningham, amazing, underrated drummer in my opinion. Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine is phenomenal.
Who gave me that poster?
Mike Ramondi gave it to Keith Ulrey, and then you bought it from Keith.
That's right.
That is from my bassist.
You know the chain of custody.
I know the chain of custody. Well, he's not my bassist, but he used to play bass in Empire Cinema, so I always think he's a guitarist in High Beam. But that's where that came from.
You got to send him over so you can visit.
Mike is awesome. Oh, Mike's a great guy to talk to.
Send him my way.
I'll let him know.
All right.
But yeah, so I really love.
Did you see the concert they did in England in like 2010 or 2011? When
no.
Oh, they opened with Testify, and the crowd is just.
They're
bananas.
one of the. I think they're one of those bands where you watch the second or third show they ever put on that's on video, and you can see it from that moment. You're like, whatever this band does is going to be insane because it's there from like the second they started.
They didn't become Rage Against the Machine. They were from day one.
So that's really great and organic. I can't take away, like I'm gonna catch flack from drummers, but Aaron Gillespie from Under Oath.
Okay.
I mean, if you listen to his drumming, despite what you think of their music, his drumming, he's like Dave Grohl on steroids. He's not a technically great player, but he was always really fun to watch. And I grew up watching when I was 15, 16. Right. I would go watch these guys and they were just insane. And he would still play these really intricate parts. He doesn't get enough credit. I don't love their new material, but that guy saying he wasn't an influence is like a joke. I love his drumming on all the early Under Oath stuff. I can't not give credit to Joey Jordison. I don't really like Slipknot now. Right. But that's obvious. That's somebody that definitely influenced me back in the day. Have you ever heard of Josh Freese? Plays in the Vandals, Devo.
Oh, sure.
He's played with, what's the guy from The Replacements? Paul Westerberg.
Yeah.
He played with him when he was like super young. He's been in Nine Inch Nails.
Okay.
He's one of those guys that can do everything.
Right.
Gil Sharon. That's a guy who used to play in Dillinger Escape Plan. He's played for Manson. And there's a lot of really good studio drummers that don't get a lot of attention that are
Do you know who Chris Maggio is?
Yes, but I'm trying. Who did he?
He's on the High on Fire on the last year. He took over for their drummer.
Yeah.
And he just like recently, I think, like severed a finger off of his hand, and they had to put it back on or something crazy like that.
High on Fire, he'll probably be fine.
Yeah.
Didn't the guy lose his toes?
Matt Pike lost his toes.
From
diabetes or something.
Yeah, but he's fine. He's still rocking. Those guys will rock until
that guy's
they're
a
dead.
zombie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I love all the. I'm a big, I was a big Mastodon fan. So Bron Daler,
he's great.
I love him
he's
a lot.
Great.
Ben Kohler from Converge.
Ben Kohler is amazing.
And he's in All Pigs Must Die, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff. Who else did I say? Dale Crover, obviously.
You know who else I really like? The guy from. Have you ever heard of Me Without You?
Yes, I have, but I don't know.
I think it's Ricky Dim.
They're one of those bands that a lot of people love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Greg was telling me he went into a deep.
It's one of those things. It's kind of like it's like a different end of the spectrum of Deftones. If you get it and it resonates,
sure,
you will love everything they do.
Right.
If you don't, you're probably going to dislike the entire catalog. It's kind of out there. It's a little bit artsy, for lack of a better word.
So with the COVID, how much were you touring before?
No,
COVID?
I haven't done any touring. Live. Typically, just playing live a lot. So
that's what I meant.
Yeah,
playing live is what I meant.
When you're in like 2-3 bands, we were typically doing anywhere from 1 to 3 shows a month, just depending on how busy it was. So Fast Talkers was a little bit more active. High Beam, by the time we got things going, it almost like, Mike did have a kid, so that kind of slowed things down.
Right.
We all supported him going to take some time off. But yeah, probably about like 1 to 4 times a month, depending on the month.
Do you miss it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that your favorite part of it, or?
Yeah, I like the hangs with the group of guys, because it's almost like in a way it's almost like poker night. Do
you write any of the music for any of the bands?
I don't write other instruments, but I will say, and I don't think I'm saying this like in an egotistical way, I do think I have an ear for like helping arrange. And I typically can try to spur ideas with like beats, or if I hear somebody doing something, what I like to do in all the bands I'm in is like, hey, keep playing that.
Yeah.
Even if it's just somebody like tuning or messing with a pedal, if I hear something there, I will literally stop and just go repeat, like start playing, and I'll put it on my phone because I hear something.
You can play some drums to it and make something out of it.
And I can't write guitar. I don't know how to play anything other than drums. I can barely play drums, but I do think I have an ear for like arrangements.
What about lyrics?
No, I'm terrible
tough,
at that.
Man.
It's my second language.
Right.
So I speak kind of broken technically, even though you probably can't tell like I'm foreign. My understanding, it's like opposite verb, adjective, verb, noun agreements. So my brain still kind of functions like that. And it's not good for our artistic writing, like any kind of pose. Yeah.
Okay. But have you guys been writing a lot, recording a lot?
Fast Talkers has basically been dormant, other than the guy whose band it is. His name's Cheech. He's been doing a lot of writing on his own and kind of doing his own little like scratch tracks, like bedroom demos, which is totally cool. So he's been kind of doing that. We've not been active. High Beam has basically kind of been on the back burner. Mike and I have sent some ideas back and forth because he does the primary songwriting on guitar. But that's been dormant. But the other 2 bands I'm in have been a little bit more active in terms of like, I've been practicing a bit with both of them, even though that's still been very like reduced.
Right.
But the heavier bands I'm playing in right now are definitely a little bit more active.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I got Elliot waiting out there, but do me this favor. I can already tell we've got like 10 more interviews in us.
We got to talk about Dillinger Escape Land.
We got to talk about Dillinger Escape Land. I think we've got I
followed them to Tokyo.
You told me that.
I went to Tokyo to see that.
That's crazy.
Dude, it was like
How is that? Oh, well, they have a lot. Was it Melt Banana or some of those? They have like those. There's some bands over there.
Tokyo is like loves music. If you want to talk about, and I know I don't want to keep them waiting.
No, you're fine.
If you want to talk about like a culture that appreciates art in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect, I was shocked at how well it was received there.
They're very reverent and very,
they have a sense of respect for it, and it's like shows are expensive there. Like even DIY punk
like people don't go unless they really want to be there.
It
it's not like
they were like $100 tickets to go to about State Theater and then Crowbar sized venues.
But I would pay that to watch.
I would do it. I would do it 10 times over.
I'm kind of hoping, and this is kind of shitty. It's kind of shit talking. I'm kind of hoping that they all see that.
I don't think it'll happen.
You don't think so?
No, I think that
I know Ben and Greg are.
I think that dude
pissing on each other.
I think that dude, and I love that guy. I've been into Dillinger since I was literally 16. I listened to Calculating Infinity in like 2000, a year after it came out. But I think that singer Greg, even though he kept the band alive,
he's clearly got some
a little
attitude.
egotistical.
Yeah,
and I went and saw his other band, the Black Queen, in Tampa, Crowbar. It's like a synthwave band. They're good, but live, I was like, his head just seems a little big, and I think that's what's going to prevent what you're alluding
Maybe,
to.
although the Black Queen doesn't quite seem to be panning out.
No.
He's doing Kill or Be Killed with Troy Sanders, which is
It's okay.
That's a side thing.
Yeah,
But now he's putting out his own album,
it's
which
disjointed.
but it's very Dillinger sounding. It's
Some
like,
of it.
It's like, why don't you just do it with the guys and, kind of get back in there? But we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then Weinman did Giraffe Tongue Orchestra.
That already fizzled out.
Yeah,
like,
that
completely.
didn't.
It was cool.
Well, I think it's because Brent Hines fucked his foot up on a motorcycle and they couldn't tour behind
They
it.
stopped touring, but then I think they were supposed to do another album, but then they didn't end up doing it. But regardless, yeah, like I have that. I could tell you all about going to Tokyo. I mean, Tokyo is amazing to begin with, and then seeing that show there, I saw them in a room that was like a 200 cap room. I
definitely want to hear about that.
It was
you know
amazing.
Dave Decker?
I do know Dave.
Have you heard a story of seeing Fugazi in Gainesville?
I believe I've listened to you tell me about like the bloody shirt.
Yeah, from Joe Lally.
Yeah.
Who is now like on Facebook. You can be friends with, and like he's giving bass lessons online.
Every musician that has had their life turned upside down is like doing some semblance of that.
Yeah. I literally, and I am not bullshitting you or blowing smoke up your shirt. I could talk to you until 10 o'clock tonight. It was my mistake for booking 2 back to back. No disrespect to Elliot, but 100%. You're in the neighborhood.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Let's have you back on.
I'd love to do it again.
You're like a mix between Gabe from Creative Loafing and
I've
all the
never met
people.
Gabe.
So Gabe is a music writer for.
I know Ray really well too.
So he's on staff with Ray, and he used to own.
Is he Reacts?
Vinyl Fever. He used to own Vinyl Fever.
Okay,
so
okay.
If you're not friends with, please do me this favor on Facebook tonight. Become friends with Gabe Echezabal. I'm getting much better at his name.
That's a very particular name.
Every morning he posts 6 or 7 pieces of amazing music trivia that you had no idea about. I can't wait. I get excited every morning to see what Elliot is suggesting as far as music and what piece of trivia Gabe is posting.
I'll check it out.
So.
But I would love to come back on, honestly.
You're a rad dude. I love you so much. Thank you for coming by. We've got a lot of inner demons we got to work out with each other. It's going to be awesome. We'll save money on therapy. All right. Take it easy.